almost every single person completely dismissed this information. They found it online, they heard about it in interviews, their friends gave them books, they threw the books across the room. By the time they make it to me and they're fully past their chronic symptoms and they use this mind-body medicine approach, it's because they reached such a place of desperation and there was truly nothing else that they knew of to try, and it was a last resort.
Welcome back to another episode of Like Mind, Like Body, where we explore healing from chronic pain, symptoms, and conditions using a mind-body approach. I'm Christie Uipi, psychotherapist and founder of the Better Mind Center, where our team treats chronic symptoms one-on-one. Chronic pain, fatigue, and other persistent symptoms can feel isolating, confusing, and endless. Many people try everything and still feel stuck, unsure where to turn next. But across hundreds of recovery stories, there are patterns and hope. In this episode, we're exploring how the field of mind-body medicine is evolving over time. We'll discuss common threads that have emerged over the years and how the roadmap to recovery is becoming clearer to many chronic symptom sufferers. We'll also talk about why so many people come to mind-body recovery approaches as a last resort, the barriers that still exist, and the mindset shifts that make full recovery possible. If you're navigating chronic symptoms, this conversation is about understanding the path, finding hope, and seeing what steps can help move you forward. Our guest today is perfectly suited for the conversation, and she has a lot of insight and wisdom worth sharing. Raelan Agle knows firsthand how debilitating chronic symptoms can be. At 30 years old, almost overnight, she became incredibly unwell and was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. It would take a full decade before she finally found her way past it. During those years, one of the hardest parts was how little clear, hopeful information seemed to exist for people trying to understand what was happening to them. That experience sparked a deep passion to share the kinds of insights and resources she wishes had been easier to find when she needed them most. As she began to understand her own recovery more deeply, that personal journey gradually grew into a passion to help others make sense of their symptoms and find their own path forward. Along the way, Raelan's professional background helped shape how she approaches this work today. She holds a master's degree in social work and previously worked as a clinical social worker in medical settings. With training in psychoeducation and years spent helping people make sense of complex health information, she further developed an ability to translate complicated science into practical, actionable tools people can actually use in their daily lives. Today, Raelan is an author, YouTuber, and the founder of the recovery program Brain Retraining 101, a space where she has worked with hundreds of people to help them move past conditions like ME/CFS and long COVID. Through her popular YouTube channel, she also reaches millions of people around the world with videos sharing recovery stories, practical tools, and insights into the science of neuroplastic symptoms. Raelan, I am so excited that you're here to do the show. Welcome to the space. I cannot wait to interview you.
Christy, thank you so much for having me. Genuinely, I am a massive fan of your work and this podcast. This is my favorite information space in our whole community, and I'm so excited every time a new episode comes out. So I'm truly honored to be here and ridiculously excited to have this conversation with you.
That means a lot. I'm so glad you're here. And I'm excited to get a chance to interview you because the last time we saw each other, the roles were reversed. We were on your YouTube channel. You were interviewing me. So I'm excited to give you the mic and a chance to highlight your expertise in this interview. I'd love to start by chatting a little bit about some of the things that you've learned over the years interviewing tons of experts in the field. You've interviewed dozens and dozens of experts in the mind-body space, doctors, program founders, therapists, researchers, coaches, you name it, you've interviewed them. So I'd be curious if you could start the conversation for us by zooming out a bit and sharing what are some of the broad themes that you've learned over the years. Where are these different practitioners converging in their ideas? Where is there agreement and alignment? Where are opinions differing? I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this question to.
Well, I feel like you're the perfect person to have this conversation with. So I'm really excited to hear what your experience has been of this, because I know you have interviewed a lot of people as well. So I'll share my zoom out perspective, and then it would be great to hear, like, how does this line up with what you're seeing? You know, what else are you seeing? It's been really interesting. And initially it was quite overwhelming, because I would interview all of these different people, and all of them incredible, experts, like leaders in the field, doing amazing work, helping hundreds, some of them thousands of people. Utmost respect for all of them. And I'd interview them, and I think, okay, yes. And I'm learning right along with everyone in the audience, like, okay, trying to soak it all in, soak it all in. And I started seeing some strong themes, and then some areas where there was quite a bit of variation. So one of the things that I try and do with my channel is to zoom out and help people see, because it can be overwhelming, because not everyone can watch dozens or hundreds of videos and pull out all the key pieces. So like, let me try and do this a little bit for you. So this is my take. So this is my perspective. So of course I'll have my own, biases and things built into that, but coming at this, as objectively as I can. The great news is that I see far more agreement and alliance in our community than there is variation. So that is fantastic. Like, some of the same messages are coming at us again and again and again, which is wonderful. So I'll start with what are some of the things that everyone seems to agree on, and be coming at things with more or less generally the same approach, and then just highlight some of the spaces where not everyone is coming at it exactly the same way. So virtually everyone that I interview that's working on the professional end of this seems to agree that learning a bit of the neuroscience is very helpful. Like, that's a really good starting place, because it's a brand new way of looking at chronic symptoms for most of us. It's just so counterintuitive to what we've been taught growing up, to even what many of our doctors are telling us, all the great stuff that you talk about here on your channel. So that's really nice to hear. And if I could sum up the number one thing that everyone seems to be saying in one version or another, is what we're looking at, and I don't think this will be any surprise, but is we're looking at safety in the body, safety in the nervous system. And, I was thinking about it when I was preparing to chat with you, and I thought that's going to seem like such an obvious thing to say, but it wasn't so long ago that wasn't obvious, and that everyone didn't agree on that. So that everyone's coming at it with one resounding word for the most part, it is really amazing, because really, even when I started my channel only about 5 years ago, recovery information was often conflicting and confusing. So the overlap that we're seeing now, it reflects how much the science is evolving, and how we have more research, and how the recovery stories are showing more consensus. So that's, that's a really great thing.
Yeah,
and,
absolutely. And the fact that we're all settling in on that one word or idea, it might seem like, oh my gosh, we've heard it 1,000 times. You have to make yourself feel safe. Your body is safe, 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 safe. And we got used to that very quickly, because I agree with you. It was not very long ago that not everyone started with the neuroscience. People might just say something like, more of an everything but the kitchen sink approach. Like, yeah, your pain is this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. Do a little of this, do a little of that. It's all connected, which is different from singling out this idea of safety. So it might seem like you're saying something that we're all used to, but we only got used to it relatively recently.
Yes. Yeah. And it's so incredible now that so many people are up to speed on this. I know we have a long way to go, and a lot of learning, and a lot of, ways to better get that information out. But there is a lot of, consensus around this. And, when people talk about safety, I think about, it is so great, because when I used to do these interviews, and I would be frantically taking notes, and I would be compiling notes over time and trying to synthesize it. And it was just not so easy to think about this concept of nervous system regulation, or brain retraining, or whatever we want to call it. Like, I had dozens of pages of notes trying to wrap my head around it. And I think now the great thing is that, we can look at it in a much simpler way, so it's not so overwhelming for people. And when I hear people talking about it, and it's very similar to when I hear you talking about it, part of this I have learned from you. You are one of the experts I am, referring to. But people talk about safety, so what does that mean? Because people are like, well, I think I feel safe. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm curious to see how you see it broken down, but how I see it when I zoom out from all of it is that people typically look at it in 4 areas. They might not look at all 4, but these are the 4 that come up, and they are safety in your body, safety around activity, safety around your symptoms themselves, and then safety around emotions. And what I find is that 3 of those, almost everyone agrees on. And I know you talk about it a lot here, so I won't go into depth teaching people what this looks like. I know you have a lot of great information, but just to summarize or highlight if this is a newer way of understanding things for people, or if they're sharing this in a space where people might not be aware. So, we talk about safety in the body. So many people arrive or are on this journey understandably believing that their body is really broken, like there is something really wrong, like there is a serious disease or all of their organs must be shutting down. I have interviewed many people that have told me that they genuinely thought they might be dying, like their symptoms were so severe that they thought their body must be broken beyond repair. So the foundational shift when you're looking at what are commonly called neuroplastic symptoms, or many other terms, but that's the one I stick to these days, is just that shift, is understanding the nature of neuroplastic symptoms, that chronic symptoms can exist in your body in the absence of illness or injury, and they can be a result of maladaptive neural firing patterns in the brain, and just starting to feel safe in your body. Okay, like despite the fact that I feel so horrible, I actually am okay. And that can, right in itself, can be a shift in symptoms, as I'm sure you've seen.
Absolutely.
We give people all sorts of tools to do this. So it's not just like we tell you, just you're okay, trust that you're okay. But when you learn the science, you start to be like, okay. And then we give people clues to look at, things that are a little bit fishy that I hear many of your experts talk about on the channel, like are they moving around? Are they worse some days, better others? Are they better when you're happy, worse when you're upset? Are they impacted by things that shouldn't really be impacting your body? Do you have 27 different symptoms at once? The chances that you have so many things broken in your body at once is really unlikely. So, we get people to do things like create evidence lists, like what can you do on your good days? Like, wait a minute, I could climb the stairs yesterday, so I must be physically capable of it. And just, getting those messages of safety. So I just want to pause there. Like, does that track with what you're seeing with the people you interview?
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate your highlighting of the simplicity of this, that's a piece that's newer in the past couple of years. Again, going from this idea of it's all connected, a biopsychosocial approach, which is true. I mean, everything is connected in some ways. Our emotions are connected to our behaviors, are connected to our thought patterns, but the shift is towards this simplification. Pain and other symptoms are understood as a danger signal. How can we neutralize a danger signal? By shifting towards something that is safe or safer. I really appreciate that you are highlighting that specific, not only transition, but simplification to, with all the signals that your body is interpreting as dangerous or threatening, how can we help bring some of that down and help you feel safer?
Oh, it is such an incredible thing that we are understanding this so much more clearly, or maybe just that I'm understanding this so much more clearly. There are many others that probably got there a long time ago, but it was just so overwhelming. And I would put out these like 2-hour videos, like a bit of an exaggeration, but try to explain this to people. And now, thankfully, I can usually do it in under 10 minutes. And I just really feel for the people that were sifting through my earlier videos trying to make sense, because I was trying to make sense of all of it too. There was just so much information out there, and it was really hard to zoom out and see, okay, what is the core pieces of what we're saying? So, in part of sharing what the experts agree on, part of my hope here with this is also just helping people who are listening, just reminding them of the simplicity of it. It's not easy necessarily, but it doesn't have to be so complicated in your brain when you're looking at, how do I move forward from this? Like, what do I do with these thousands of hours of interviews out there? I feel so overwhelmed. Okay, so with that, the second one I said was safety around activity. And I know this is not news to you or probably most of your listeners, but just quick recap that activity itself starts to feel dangerous. And it might start with one thing, like you might perhaps have a really stressful job, a toxic environment. It might feel unsafe. You're walking on eggshells all the time. You're always nervous. You always think you're about to get fired. And suddenly you start getting symptoms at work. We know, I can't believe 5 years ago, I'd never heard this term, and now it's practically like tattooed on my arm, like what fires together, wires together, Hebb's law. How did I ever not know what that was? But so now the brain and the nervous system is connected, that activity going to work as dangerous. And then it just starts to generalize. Maybe you get some symptoms while you're at the gym, and now exercise is dangerous, and then walking, and then leaving your house, and then sitting up too long, and then speaking. And the brain can develop almost many people describe it like a phobia. Life itself becomes dangerous. And so a part of the process is, you can develop all that safety around your body, lay in bed all day long going like, I am safe, my body is fine. And it doesn't mean you can get up the next day and go to the gym. Like, you can't sit there and just go, okay, the gym is safe, the gym is fine. And then you just go to the gym and you have a workout and you're okay. So virtually everyone that I talk to, I'm going to guess you're seeing the same, but talk about the importance of doing. So you actually have to start slowly, gently expanding activity, graded exposure, treating it like phobias. You need to have some behavior change. I heard it described once as breaking the rules, which I loved, because we create all these rules. I can't think of the person, so I can't give them credit. I apologize, but I can't be around strong smells. I can't leave my house. I can't walk too long. I can't be on the screen for more than 5 minutes. So, but just like with a phobia, if you had a near drowning experience, you wouldn't just jump into the ocean and just be like, it's fine, it's safe. You're going to work up to it slowly. But so everyone that I talk to seems to agree that a massive part of this work is expanding your world, expanding your activity, and building safety around that, and slowly teaching your brain and nervous system that it's okay and it's safe to do these things. So that feels like another time to pause and just like, how does that land for you?
The importance of exposure probably can never be understated, and there's so many different paths to helping someone make activity feel more comfortable in their body again. But the brain is so hyperprotective, right? Like, the analogy that comes to mind for me is if you get food poisoning after eating a bad meatball in a plate of spaghetti and meatballs, and you just have terrible food poisoning and your body revolts against you, probably for the next few months, maybe even the next year, the smell of any Italian food at all is going to make you nauseous. Any Italian food, pizza, calzone, just some marinara sauce, because your brain is working so quickly to generalize that one time I got really sick from that one meatball. I'm not going near anything that could ever make me feel that way again. The same thing happens with our bodies. Like, if we have a back pain and we have conditioned response to feel pain when we bend down, how quickly is our brain going to hyperprotect and warn us against anything that's remotely similar to bending, putting your shoe on, squatting, bending down to pick up your kiddo? And I'm totally with you that we have to work pretty hard against our brain's tendency to generalize the pain out and start sending us those danger messages left, right, and center. So I'm glad that you brought that up around activity. And you said that there are 4 main areas where people need to work on feeling safer again. Feeling safer in their body being the first one, feeling safer with activity being the second one. What's the third one that often comes up?
It's just safety around symptoms. So even once you're feeling safe in your body and you start expanding activity, you have to, and I know I'm probably preaching to the choir here, and I am getting right next after this to the parts where I do see quite a bit of variation. But again, where people seem to agree is that you need to shift your relationship with symptoms, like from fear and fighting to more curiosity and observation. So most of us, for months or years or decades, when symptoms come up, we get really frustrated, really depressed. It's really scary. Am I getting worse? I thought maybe I was getting a little bit better, but now these symptoms are here. I don't think I'm ever going to get better. This is clearly a sign that something is wrong. And then that reinforces to your nervous system, something is wrong. Okay, I was right. And then more symptoms. So I know this is something that we talk about a lot, but just highlighting again, I think it's powerful to see that, at least from where I'm sitting and the people that I talk to, virtually everyone talks about that you need to shift your relationship with symptoms, and you can do that through things like, somatic tracking, or we talk about the 5 Fs, like not constantly try to focus on them or fix them or fight them, or I always forget a couple of the Fs.
There's a lot of them.
But just generally, one of the best examples I've heard, and I use it a lot, is just like when you aren't facing a chronic symptom condition, you're just going through life plugging along, and you go to the gym or you do some sort of physical activity, and then the next day your muscles are really, really sore and you're not freaking out. You're like, what is going on? You're not going to your doctor. You're not going to the hospital. You don't like it. Like, it's not fun. You're not like, great pain, but you're like, it's here. And I knew this was coming, and it's fine. And it's a part of the process. So it's shifting to get to a place like that with your chronic symptoms as well. Would you agree?
Yes.
I know. I think
Absolutely.
You would agree.
I mean,
Yeah.
I could listen to you talk about this all day. I can't remember the 4th bucket that you said. What was the last area where people need to shift their perspective?
Okay. So the last one was safety around emotions. And this is where I hear quite a bit of variation about how people come about it. And I think this is where it can be a little bit confusing. So my goal here is to hopefully point out, or at least validate, that yes, you're hearing some different messages on that, and what we do with that. So, I mean, generally, most people I interview seem to agree that emotions are a part of this. And I know Dr. Howard Schubiner explains really well that physical and emotional threats use the exact same neural pathways in the brain, and the same threat responses that protect us from physical danger also fire in response to emotional danger. So I think most people, not everyone, most people seem to agree that emotions themselves can be labeled as unsafe by the brain and nervous system. But here's where I really am excited to hear what you have been hearing from people and what your take is on this. Because for the various people that I talk to, some actually don't focus on emotion at all. Or even in just some of the books, and some of our, experts and leading people in the fields talk about this more like it's a mistake communication in the brain that needs to be rewired. The symptoms are simply a mistake. Emotions aren't a part of it. I've talked to some other experts that also don't focus on emotion, but would say that symptoms are never a mistake. But how they see it is more of like thinking about the brain like a computer. It's an operating model like predictive coding, and it's using all the data that it has going back to all the way to, birth and beyond. So it's nothing to do with emotions. It's just a data problem. So you just need to do a data updates. So it's going off of more accurate data. So it's never like they would say your brain and nervous system are never reacting to things. It's just always predicting, and the symptoms aren't a mistake. You just need to sort of do a data update. And then I would say in the middle is where most people are, where they incorporate tools around emotions, but it's a little bit more individually on a case-by-case basis. Like, let's look at what's going on for you and see how big of a piece of the puzzle this is for you. But then I also talk to some people that say it's 100% emotion. It is nothing else. And even some go so far as to say that brain retraining really has nothing to do with it. Trying to involve your brain or any sort of brain retraining is not an effective approach. We 100% need to deal with emotions if we want to get past these chronic symptoms. But then even on team emotion, some of the people that I talk to say it is primarily emotions from the past. This is things that you have suppressed, that you are carrying. This is past trauma. We need to unpack all of that. And then some others say, absolutely not. Your emotions from the past have nothing to do with this. It is 100% your emotions in the present. What is happening right now? Like, what are you not allowing to flow. So this is where I feel for people who are listening and watching these videos to be like, huh.
Yeah,
so what do you see
where
in this
do I
space?
dig in?
Yeah.
It made me smile that you called it team emotion, because there absolutely are different camps, different teams within the field. How important is emotion? When should you introduce it, if at all? How important is it, if at all?
Yes.
And great point that people take a differing opinion in terms of where the emotion is most problematic, historically or currently. I come back to that. This is my way, right? There's your way of explaining it. There's my way of explaining it. This is the whole thing. Everyone has a different way of explaining it. I come back to, if we simplify it back down to what we were saying in the beginning, symptoms, chronic symptoms are a danger signal, and we need to work to shift things to feel safer in nature. Of course, people can have threatened responses to their own emotions. Of course, emotions can feel out of control and messy and difficult to work through. Of course, you could have received messages growing up and through society that told you your emotions are bad or dangerous. So of course, your nervous system can respond in really maladaptive ways to emotion. The same way that your nervous system can respond really in a maladaptive way to your mother-in-law, or to conflict, or to abandonment. So I know my mother-in-law is really sweet, and I use mother-in-law so often on this show. People probably think I have a serious issue. So yeah, like, your nervous system can perceive anything as threatening, whether it is or it isn't. And if it does, symptoms can arise. If threat comes in, if threat comes in, symptoms come out. How do you think of it after interviewing all of these people? Like, what's your personal take? That's mine.
Yeah, I mean, if I had to choose a team, which is something it's a thing I try to stay away from on my channel, because one of the things I really aim to do is just like, here's a buffet of information. You decide what to do. But forced to choose, I would definitely be almost entirely on team emotion. From the people that I interview, and I've interviewed just recovery stories as well, I have seen a very small amount of cases that from where I'm sitting, it looks like the emotional piece wasn't huge. They recovered with some quick, brain retraining and safety messages and on with their life that they went. However, the overwhelming majority seem to absolutely have a piece of that in there. And I'm not sure how we could tease out the two, because when we are developing fear responses to things in life, I can't see how it's not almost always connected to some level of emotion. Like I gave the example about the unsafe work environment. Well, that's going to bring up maybe shame, maybe rage, like all sorts of things. So I just don't know how it's feasible that we can parse out the two 100% of the time. There's probably outliers. I think I've seen a couple on my channel, but for most of the part, I think taking a look at that emotional piece is a really good idea.
You just brought up a second ago that you also do a lot of interviews of patients. So it's not only with experts. You learn a lot from interviewing experts, but you also have done, I think, hundreds of patient recovery stories. Isn't that true? Isn't it over 300? Am I making that up?
I think it's almost 300. We're getting up to 300.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Like 299. Can I switch gears and ask you a little bit about what you've learned there? Because you get a different take when you're speaking to patients and what they've learned along the way. And you've mentioned to me that you've also noticed quite an evolution in the patient recovery story. So there's this dual process where the field is evolving and we are starting to agree on many things. And of course, there are still diverging opinions out there. And in a parallel way, the patient recovery stories are reflecting that change and also informing that change, right? Because I would hope that treatment is coming from a place of learning from the patient's experience. So can you tell us a little bit about that? What have you learned? What's been the through line? What's been the arc? What are you noticing over the years with patient recovery stories?
Oh, try and stop me from talking about this. You're going to have to cut me off at some point. It has been absolutely fascinating. And the most exciting thing, I think, well, there's many, many exciting things, but you talked about patients, impacting and informing the process. And that's one of the themes that I saw early on, is there was a lot of frustration with people that it felt like people were recovering, me being one of them, and like no one was listening to us, and we'd hear about research, and then unfortunately we all went through the pandemic, and then we had literally billions of dollars going into research and coming up with their hands up saying we don't know what's going on, and we're like, over here, someone ask us. Maybe we have something to offer. And it has shifted so much. So I'm going to zoom back a little bit, but just first to say a snapshot of right now, it is, like right now there are 2 different teams of researchers through universities who are doing studies on the interviews from my channel. So they've taken the transcripts and they're coming at it from different directions and pulling out recovery themes and seeing what can be learned from it. So that with the aim of publishing these in medical journals, which is great because we know we need
that's
the more
awesome.
The more research
I didn't
we
know
have.
that. That's great, Raelan.
Yeah, please don't ask me to speak in any intelligible way about what these researchers are doing because I'm letting them do their thing. But 100%, of course, once we have that published, I'll be shouting that from the rooftops. So yes, all of us out there, your stories matter. People are listening. People are learning from them, and you are informing how the professionals are approaching this, and plus we can get the medical community to pay more attention, of course, as I don't have to tell you, the more published research we have about what's going on. And doctors now reach out to me all the time saying they send patients to my channel, which I just really respect the humility of a medical professional saying, I don't have all the answers, but like here are some great recovery stories out there. Here are some YouTube channels that seem to be sharing some great information. So it's definitely shifted. Back from my day when like my doctor thought I was nuts, and now doctors are reaching out to me. I'm sending their patients. It's a really nice shift to see. Okay, so I've only been doing this for just over 5 years. So you wouldn't think it would be that big of a change in that short of time. But when I first started interviewing people, and I've said this a zillion times, but I think it's just such a powerful way to see how different things are now. When I first started, I started with my story because I recovered and thought I achieved some sort of miracle. So I had to tell people about it because back then we were still hearing that stat in the chronic fatigue syndrome community, which is what I was diagnosed with and I lived with for 10 years before recovering, was that 95% of people didn't recover. So I'm like, wait a minute, I recovered. There's got to be more people. I'm going to find them. I thought if I really searched, I'd maybe find 5 other people in the world because I'm like, no one's recovering, but I'm going to search and I'm going to find them and I'm going to start sharing their stories. And I did. And initially the recovery themes seemed all over the place. And even my recovery story, if you hear how I first shared it, I recovered. I largely did not understand how I recovered. I see now the key things that helped me, but at the time I was talking about all sorts of stuff that I think generally made me a healthier human, but were not addressing my chronic symptoms. So this might have been the case with some of the people I was recovering as well, but people were saying things like, I switched to a carnivore diet, I went to see a shaman in the jungle in Thailand, and I did Cambo, that frog poisoning, and got really sick and that cured me, or it was just all over the place. And I don't know if I'm doing more harm than good by putting this on, like I'm probably just confusing people more. But again, I'm like, let's just have this buffet. I'm like, I'm not going to filter. I'm not going to decide what is right or what is wrong. And who's to say that those things weren't what those people needed? I don't know. But I just put it out there. But then it started shifting. And by the way, the recovery stories started flooding in. There's no shortage of them out there, which is incredible. But then people started talking about it in ways that made me very nervous again, because I knew I had very unwell people, or people who felt very unwell watching my channels, and people were bedbound, like people had lost their jobs, people were just in a state of constant suffering, and they needed real actionable advice for their very serious symptoms. And people were coming on the channel saying things like, I just needed to spend more time in nature, or I started meditating more, or I realized my life wasn't aligned with how I needed to be living, or I was really isolated and I needed to build up some community, or I just needed to be nicer to myself. And I just thought, oh my goodness, like the people on the other side of the screen are probably so not happy with me right now because it just didn't sound, I believed every one of them. I'm like, this clearly worked for them, but I thought this can't be, this can't be helpful for people. And people are not going to, it feels almost invalidating. Like, what? Squirrels? No, squirrels are not the answer to me not getting out of bed for the last 6 months. So I kind of want to punch you in the face, I imagine, was the reaction of a few people.
Yeah, because it seemed so simple. Simple and random. Like this one thing really worked. And then someone else would say this other seemingly not connected or related thing. And none of them in and of itself felt powerful enough to speak to the suffering that your listeners were going through.
So just to really validate how serious these symptoms are that people are facing, because we know that people with chronic syndromes can be in a world of pain with really debilitating, really physical symptoms, are really suffering. So I think about like someone with a different diagnosis, because often diagnoses like chronic fatigue syndrome can sound really not serious. So already you're not being taken seriously. But if we think about someone with a diagnosis that we do understand more about and take more seriously, like imagine if someone had a cancer diagnosis and then they went to a channel about cancer recovery and the video was saying, have you tried knitting? This really helped me. And it would just be, I would think, infuriating for people because they'd think I have a very serious physical condition and you're giving me really not helpful, tangible stuff. So it was just, it was just challenging seeing that this is absolutely what was working for people, but it just didn't sound like it could be the answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And the invalidation is so real, and it doesn't take much when you're in that level of pain and distress. It just doesn't take that much to feel so upset by somebody's suggestions. So what shifted? When did you notice a shift, and what was the change?
The shift, I would say, was a couple of years ago, and I don't know how you've seen it on your end, but from my end, it happened very fast. So people were still coming on the channel and still saying some of those similar things, like I needed to get out in nature, I needed a life that was more in line with how I wanted to be living it, or that was less intense, or I didn't realize how hard on myself I was being. I needed to get out of a stressful job. But they were also like neuroplasticity and autonomic nervous system experts. So they were explaining to me exactly, why these things were problematic for them, and talking to me about all the safety stuff we just talked about and explaining the tools that they used. So it was nice to see it, it validated those perhaps couple of years of interviews that sounded a little bit out there, and we weren't talking about any science really, or explaining it in the strategies in any evidence aligned way. And now people come on and most of them know more than me, and they're just teaching me about exactly what was going on with their nervous system and their brain, and how they got to the place they are now and chronic symptom free.
It's so interesting what you're saying, Raelan, because something about our efforts in the field to create clearer pain education seems to have helped patients contextualize what's working for them. So maybe knitting really did help someone. Maybe going to that shaman in the woods, or taking that, what did you say, frog poison? Like maybe
combo, or combo.
Maybe any and all of those things for any individual person was genuinely helpful. Mm-hmm. But putting that within the context of that helped my nervous system relax. That helped me make a pivotal shift towards safety in one of those 4 areas that you talked about earlier. And so instead of someone leading with, it was this certain path I took in a special place in the woods, they might lead with, I recognize the need to reduce the activation of my nervous system. And here are the things that worked for me. And there are so many different ways to calm the nervous system down. So that's so interesting that you're seeing the structure, the context with which someone is explaining their symptoms has changed over time. And that's where the unison is coming. And that's where the alliance and the agreement is. It's not necessarily that everyone is taking the same steps to get there. It's that they're contextualizing it in a similar way, which is really interesting. I also wanted to ask you about the shift in diagnosis classification that you've seen over the past few years. So you've talked to me about this a little bit, and I'm wondering if you can share with listeners on the show that in the past, it felt like every diagnosis had their own community, and each diagnosis within the chronic symptom world was very distinct. So there was CFS, then there was ME/CFS, there was POTS, MCAS, now long COVID. And these camps didn't necessarily play well together or want a lot of commingling in the past. What have you noticed? What's changed? And what do you attribute those changes to?
Yeah, so much has changed. When I first started my channel, I was talking primarily about chronic fatigue syndrome and then also ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis. I still have a challenge with that mouthful. But just with the two of those, and I would get so many upset comments from people that I was implying that they were at all related. To talk about them both in the same space was really insulting to people, and people thought they were fundamentally different conditions. And then, from there, COVID happened, and we started seeing all these cases of long COVID. And I had learned, I had got so much pushback from attempting to talk about ME, even though my diagnosis was CFS. I'm like, I'm not going to touch this whole COVID space. That is not my space. I have no business speaking to something I've never been through. But then I started getting a lot of frustrated comments from people saying, when are you going to start talking about long COVID? Because so many of these people were going to their doctors or to these clinics and told, it's very similar to, or it's evolved into, and they're also getting a CFS or an ME diagnosis. But then there was still a bit for a while of, okay, we can talk about them together, but they're still all very separate. But then we started to see in the interviews over the years that by the time people fully got past their diagnosis, they had received sometimes such a laundry list of diagnoses, like long COVID, fibromyalgia, MCAS, maybe vaccine injury, CFS, IBS, POTS. I'm sure I'm missing chronic migraines, just so many different things. And I think we heard enough people in interviews talking about how at the end they saw it was all one root cause. And in the beginning, when everyone was really quite divided, understandably, it's when most of us had very little understanding of what was going on and had never heard of neuroplastic symptoms or mind-body conditions. And we're still thinking of it as very physical things. So I think over time, just as our general knowledge and understanding has expanded and increased, and more of the research and the science is getting out there, and then we have hundreds of people, real life people sharing their recovery stories, reiterating that, saying, I think it was all the same. People seem to have seen that they get far more value from coming at this together, and maybe not everyone agrees that it's all exactly the same, but people seem to be seeing or feeling that there's far more in common than there is difference. So it's really great to see. I get almost no comments anymore from people saying, quit lumping these together, or this has nothing to do with that. So it's great because we as a community are going to do much better if we work together and learn from each other. And that's very much what I'm seeing now. Supportive people, regardless of what their specific diagnosis is, just working together and supporting each other and learning from each other, which is amazing.
It's so important. It's so important. And I'm encouraged by the coming together of all of these seemingly disparate diagnoses. And I would take it a step further, because one thing that's really exciting me about the field right now is we are starting to expand the umbrella of mind-body medicine to include people who do have some structural differences, or who do have some sort of pathological disease process, who do have, say, lupus or an autoimmune disease, or who do have some sort of injury or difference in their body, nerve damage, something that they may live with for the rest of their lives, or they understand does have some sort of impact on their body or biology. I've seen a really nice opening of the umbrella in the mind-body world to say, you belong here too. You don't need to be 100% convinced that every single thing in your body is 100% safe for these tools and techniques to work for you. And it gives some agency to the patient to use the tools and the perspectives in a way that works for them. And I hope personally that we can continue expanding that umbrella without losing the heart of the neuroplastic education, which I think is so important. There is so much that can come from confidently saying, I understand my brain is responsible for these symptoms, but this blooming of the mind-body field to say anyone can use these techniques. You don't have to have a completely clean bill of health to use these techniques, and you still belong here. That's been another shift I've been noticing, and I really like it. Another thing I wanted to pick your brain about while I have you is why so many people, given all that we've learned and how much the field has evolved and how much more agreement there is, why so many people are still coming to mind-body medicine as a last resort. Because that feels consistent, even with all the positive changes that have happened in the past few years. So what is going on with that? Why do you think that that is still so prevalent?
Yeah, I think so much about this because I just find it heartbreaking thinking about how many people are in the world that are still significantly struggling and suffering when there is information that could be helping them. And when I interview various doctors and experts on the channel, they'll give me different estimates for how many people they think this information could help, but it's usually within the same ballpark. Like when I interview physicians, they'll often say that they feel somewhere between 30 to 40% of their patients are facing neuroplastic symptoms and could benefit from this approach to recovery. And when I hear people talk about more broadly in the world, I think it's a really tough thing to estimate, but the numbers are large and they are scary. And it's typically somewhere in the hundreds of millions of people who are facing, what we typically call neuroplastic conditions that could benefit from this information. And yet either they have it or they're not using it. So what is going on there? Why is this so hard or why are we not reaching these people effectively? So I think an obvious one, perhaps, but important to talk about is that when people start feeling seriously unwell, regardless of where they live, for the most part, the first thing they do is they go to their doctor, right? And most doctors are not trained in recognizing and treating neuroplastic symptoms. So they go to their doctor, and most of us, myself included, were brought up and socialized to think your doctor is the expert. If they don't know what to do, I'm not possibly going to be able to figure this out. And I think it's an important thing to point out because I remember when I interviewed Dr. David Clark, who the president of the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms, and he estimates that less than 1% of doctors in the US are trained in recognizing and treating neuroplastic symptoms. So that means that more than 99% of people are ending up in a doctor's office with a doctor that doesn't have the information that they need to get well. So we think, okay, the doctor can't help them, and it is overwhelming to think if they can't help me, how am I going to fix this myself? But then you go home and every day you're suffering and you think, I can't live my life like this. This can't just be a life. So we're desperate. So the second place most people go is to Dr. Google. And these days, it's very different, even just in the last couple of years. You go into, YouTube or any search engine and you type in CFS recovery, like chronic fatigue syndrome recovery, or long COVID recovery, or chronic pain recovery. And it's really not that hard to come across information like what we're talking about. There's a ton of it out there. So before, it used to be even hard to find online, like I didn't know about it for years. This stuff was not easily searchable, but now it is. So it gets you thinking, like, what is happening? Why, if the information is fairly easy to find online and still people aren't recovering, like what is going on there? So I think about from the interviews that I've done from, all of these almost 300 people that I've talked to. And this is what I've seen, that there are typically 3 reasons why this information is not being used or dismissed. I'm sure there are more, but these are the big ones that I see. And it's an important thing to point out that it is dismissed. You think by the time, or that the people that you find on my channel are very much team mind body medicine. And by the time they get to me, they are. But almost every single person, at least initially, and for potentially years, completely dismiss this information. They found it online, they heard about it in interviews, their friends gave them books, they threw the books across the room, like they just no, this like just no. People would get angry hearing about it. They didn't want to do it. And the people who make it, by the time they make it to me and they're fully past their chronic symptoms and they use this mind-body medicine approach, it's because they reached such a place of desperation and there was truly nothing else that they knew of to try, and it was a last resort. And I know my favorite example is one woman I interviewed, and she had tried virtually everything under the sun and spent $1 zillion like so many of us have. And she had 3 things left that she knew of that she could try, that she had exhausted everything else. And these were fecal transplants, getting stung repeatedly by bees on purpose, and mind-body medicine. And of those three, she decided that fecal transplants and bee stings sounded more credible and more appealing than the mind-body medicine. So she did those first. And when those didn't work, she's like, all right, I guess it can't hurt. Let's try this mind-body thing.
It can't hurt, but 1 million bee stings probably did.
But that felt like it might actually help. Yeah, mind-body medicine did not. Like the pain versus reward. So it's just, I'm sure I could, especially with AI, but just pull out clips of interview after interview after people saying how resistant they were to this, how initially they were the people on my channel leaving angry comments that I would even talk about it, like just how they didn't want to do it. And it was just, I sort of joke, it's not funny, but sometimes we just have to find some levity in all of this, that we have desperation on our side, us in this mind-body world, because people just need to keep trying. So eventually they get there. It's not the reason we want them to get there. So that's what I want to talk about, is like, what is happening? So I think there are a few reasons that this, and some of them probably a bit obvious, but a few reasons that this approach doesn't seem credible, and not only doesn't seem credible and is dismissed, but is even sometimes just insulting to people. So even though this information is quite readily available online, let's say someone puts CFS recovery into YouTube and they come across one of my channels or one of my videos, and they see it, but then they think, well, my doctor isn't talking about this. So like, why should I trust some YouTuber? Like right there, that doesn't seem credible. I have no medical credentials. So it's understandable that someone would think, this seems fishy. And then, but desperation on our side. So people keep looking and keep looking and keep watching videos. I'm like, okay, I'm going to stay a little bit curious. I'm going to learn more. But I imagine you've seen this same thing as well. And I'm guilty of this even on my own videos over the years, is that there's really an inconsistent way of talking about it a lot of the time, inconsistent language, and sometimes even problematic language, not intentional, of course. We're all trying to put this out there in the best possible way. But when, yesterday I was thinking about this interview today, and I was thinking about what are all the different terms that we use to refer to this kind of work. And I'm sure you could pull clips from all of my videos of me calling about a whole bunch of different things. So I just thought off the top of my head of the ones that I could think of, and then I did a quick search online and came up with about 30 more. I won't list them all, but just some of the big ones that I'm sure you're aware of. So people are watching videos, reading books, listening to podcasts, trying to learn about this, and someone's calling it mind-body medicine, someone's calling it psychophysiological disorders, someone's calling it a functional neurological disorder, or a functional somatic syndrome, or tension myositis syndrome, or tension myoneural syndrome, or a mind-body syndrome, or psychosomatic symptom, neuroplastic symptoms, medically unexplained symptoms. Like, it's just a really long language, right?
Yes.
And when you're already so skeptical and you hear all of this inconsistency, like, does that instill confidence in you that this is a legit thing if you're doing research?
Yeah. So true. People have to take such a leap of faith when they're starting to research this or starting to work with a practitioner, and then to feel like, okay, you guys don't even have your act together. You're all calling it a million different things. Like, do you even know what you're doing? Yeah. It's so real.
And is it all the same thing? Is this person talking about, functional disorders the same thing as the person talking about tension myoneural syndrome? Like, am I even looking at the same thing? And then, as I said, some of it is even according to the people that I interview, problematic language, even though we're all doing our best to use the best possible language. I mean, just to pull out a couple of those from that list. I mean, an obvious one I think is psychosomatic symptoms, because that one has a lot of baggage. It has a long history of people using it to say this is something that you're imagining and it's all in your head. So anytime someone sees psychosomatic, when you're having really severe physical debilitating symptoms, you're like, no, just no. Probably some swear words coming in there. And then another one, which is the one that I use mostly, that I've only recently shifted, is mind-body medicine, because so many people that I've interviewed said that they resisted this whole field of medicine simply because of that term. The term mind-body medicine was so insulting and so could not possibly be talking about what they have, because when you think about it, it can sound like it's all in your mind, like it just exists in your thoughts, in this intangible, imaginary thing. Like you lost your job and haven't been out of bed for 2 weeks because of something to do with your mind. Like it doesn't, I know we get it, and everyone who learns about it understands what we're talking about. But one of my favorite interviews recently was with Professor Paul Hansma, which I know we both saw at the ATNS conference in Boulder, where you were an amazing speaker there as well. And I just remember my head exploding as he passed around test tubes in the audience with these human brain organoids. And he's doing this, he's a physicist, and he's doing this research. And he's saying how we can see, like when I interviewed him, he said, this is a physical condition. This is absolutely physical. It is tangible. We can see it. There are maladaptive neural firing patterns happening in the brain, and we can see them. So if we were talking about it that way, it might land a little bit better. And when you say mind-body condition, it doesn't really sound like that. So
yes, I really appreciate everything you just said, but that last piece felt so good to me. The former patient and longtime chronic symptom wearer in me really responded very well to that. This idea of there is something wrong. When said in the right context, that actually feels amazing. Like this is real. We can point to it. It is causing real symptoms. Your brain is a part of your body. It is something that is experiencing something 100% real, that is causing symptoms that are 100% real. And the distress is so important. I really appreciated the way that you just said that. And you're already speaking to this, Raelan, so I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd add in. What do you think we as a community can do to help people move past these barriers to entry? You already started speaking to the language and start helping us attune to the patient's perspective and getting them on board. Is there anything else you would add to that? How can we help?
Yeah, and I love that you asked how we as a community can change that, because I know that our conventional medical system needs a lot of changing, and that is way above my pay grade, but I know there are wonderful people who are working on that end of it. But us as a community, I think, have a lot of power here and a lot of ability to shift the narrative, because unfortunately, today, most people aren't getting the information that they need from their doctors. They're coming to podcasts, they're coming to YouTube, they're coming to coaches and recovery programs. So, I mean, a lot of it is us coming together and figuring out how we talk about this better. I've only recently started working to collaborate better with other people in our space. And I started this like founders club where a few different program founders, there's about 6 or 8 of us that come together every month, and we just talk about this stuff. Like, why aren't we reaching people? Why is this still being dismissed? How can we do this more effectively? You know, it was someone on one of those calls who has talked a lot about the language piece of it that really got me thinking about that. So I think we could get more consistent with our language. I think the Association for the Treatment of Neuroplastic Symptoms is doing incredible work with that, and that has shifted the way I talk about this. And now I 100% refer to this as, neuroplastic symptoms, neuroplastic conditions. And it's not even just the labels that we put on it, and I have been guilty of this as well, and I'm working to change this. is that even if we're calling them neuroplastic symptoms, so we're saying what might be happening, what happens sometimes, a lot of times with chronic symptoms, is that the cause of the chronic symptoms is not, illness or damage in the body, it's maladaptive neural firing patterns in the brain. But then we have people listening and watching saying, oh, but I have COVID, or I was in a car accident, like I have scans, I have illness or damage in my body, so this doesn't apply to me. And we know that once you dig deeper and you get into the neuroscience, you understand how those acute symptoms, once they become chronic, can become a whole other sort of animal, but you're not going to see that on the surface. So it's how we label it, talking about it consistently, and then making sure that we're not saying that this happens in the absence of, disease or injury. It just can be when things don't heal in the time that they typically should, and when they've been going on for a really long time. And, explaining that whole piece that everybody has that, those normal abnormalities in their body. So yes, you probably do have things coming up on scans. Don't assume that that's where it's coming from. So there's just so many ways that I think we have the ability to help people package this up better and to focus more on the science end of things. And I see it even like when people are so skeptical, and then that level of desperation brings them to my channel. Like, fine, I'll listen to this woman named Raelan. And even once they get there and they think, okay, I'm going to give this a try. I remember Dr. David Schechter at that same ATNS conference talking about something that I found so helpful. And he said, once patients get into this, that they're still going through doubt. So typically he sees 3 layers of doubt. Like they hear about this neuroplastic stuff and like, is this real? And then they might learn a bit and be like, okay, maybe it is real, but I don't think this is what I have. And then after some time, they're like, okay, maybe this is, but then the next layer of doubt is like, I don't think I'm doing it right. I don't think I have the power to change this. And through all those layers of doubt, they keep going back to YouTube, to the podcasts, to all of these spaces, and all of this inconsistency, just further can feed that doubt and even slow down their progress, even once they've come into this world. So in short, I think it's about us working together better and just like, how do we best communicate this stuff as a team, and helping people to see that. I think some people think of us all as competition, or this is just a big business for people. And of course, it is business and people have bills to pay, but for the most part, people are really working together, and we really just want to figure out like, how do we best reach people, because most of us know personally what it's like to search for months or years or decades and not get the answers that you need. So we're like, how can we better reach these potentially hundreds of millions of people out there?
Yeah. Isn't that the best part of our niche? That is such a real sentiment that exists between us, amongst us. There is this communal feeling of all ships rise with the tide. As practitioners, the more we support each other, the better all of us are going to be doing in the field and in our businesses. And of course, most importantly, the more patients we're going to help. There are literally millions of people suffering, and there's so few of us practitioners, physicians, coaches, program founders. There's so few of us, relatively speaking. So hearing you say that the answer to all of this is just working together better and more feels spot on, and also very hopeful. And I have to say, I knew this would be the case with you, Raelan. I was really looking forward to this interview, but I felt it so thoroughly throughout this whole conversation. You have the most unique perspective, because there's a piece of you that's really future facing, that's saying, I'm forward thinking. How can I help continue to drive innovation in the field? How can I continue to bring new people into the folds? How can I keep dreaming big for patients and practitioners alike? And at the same time, you are a real-time historian of the field. You have a really unique perspective looking back at the past decade or so in terms of how much has evolved so quickly. And I really appreciate how you brought both pieces of both sides of that perspective into this conversation. I can feel your passion for this work in how you speak about it. I learned a lot, and I'm very grateful for your time and your tremendous expertise.
I'm grateful just for the opportunity to talk about this. You know, I think even before we get to this utopia where we're all on the same page and we're all using the perfect language and the same language, even I think just people hearing this, just validating for people that just because your doctor doesn't know about this doesn't mean it isn't credible. It doesn't mean it doesn't work. And validating, if you're confused, yes, of course you are. Everybody is. And again, it doesn't mean it's not credible, doesn't mean it's not something to stay curious about and to consider. So my goal is always just how do we reach more people? And I think this conversation was a great opportunity. I hope to do that. So I just appreciate talking with you about this.
Appreciate you so much. Thank you for being here.